I'm here with Professor Dirk Obbink of Christchurch, Oxford. Dirk, what is it that you work on?
I'm a papyrologist. I work on papyri. It's ancient paper, what people wrote on in Greco-Roman and also Egyptian antiquity. And it's something, or we try to approach it as a science. If you can imagine 2,000 years from now, when people are studying the records of the 19th and 20th century before the digital age, there might be a science called papyrology. And that's what we do, study these bits, most of them scraps, fragmentary pieces of ancient writing that came out of largely the rubbish mounds of Greco-Roman cities in Egypt, where the water table is so low that they lie in the sand for centuries and were excavated by archaeologists in the late 19th and early 20th century. There are literally millions of them in world collections.
So it's the fact that they were preserved in sand that means that we have them now.
That's how they were preserved, yeah. In wetter parts of the Greek and Roman world they didn't survive, except for a few chance finds like the carbonized library from Herculaneum or the Vindolanda tablets.
Yeah. And when did people start noticing what they actually had in their hands, these archaeologists?
Well, at the end of the 19th century, people started realizing that there was quite a bit of Greek and slightly lesser Latin literature preserved on these things, particularly works that we no longer have, that weren't transmitted through the Middle Ages, like Sappho, the lost plays of the Greek tragedians, and also people's public and private papers.
Right, so most of the material that we get from the Greco-Roman world is manuscript edition. It's monks writing works down. This gets passed on.
It goes back earlier than the Christian era, to the time of Alexander the Great, is when they start, and they come down to the Arab conquest. So it spans the rise of Christianity and the Ptolemaic and Roman imperial periods.
But
it's a real slice of life. None of these things were selected by monks or Renaissance scholars for preservation. These are these were books or records offices, people's private papers that were eventually worn out or recycled, or no one wanted them, and they went into the rubbish mound. So it's a complete slice of life at any given period of what writing culture was like, completely unselected.
Unlike the manuscript edition.
Unlike the manuscript edition, which is a process of complex process of canonization and canon formation, even for what was chosen among documentary texts to preserve.
Right, so we've got a crack in the window of time that we can look back at this time.
That's right.
That's really fascinating.
At the same time, it's all rubbish.
It's all rubbish. It's been thrown away.
Or it's all gossip.
Yeah.
The documentary materials are the gossip of the day. They were what people were saying and writing down, and much of it is ephemera, but very telling and illustrative ephemera about what life was like.
Do you have any examples that are quite telling of this? What a different perspective that it's offering on the ancient world?
Well, we have doctors' reports, for example, of accidents that occurred. A 9-year-old flute player girl who fell off a balcony into a street and was run over by a cart.
Oh, really?
2nd century AD. So very sort of telling instances out of real people's lives of what happened to them. We have the night watchman's report as he made his rounds walking around the city of Oxyrhynchus from shop to shop, reporting on the security of each shop, from which we can actually make up a map of the central business part of Oxyrhynchus, the forum, and the stoa, the colonnaded stoa, based on the report of his night rounds.
That's fascinating. So you get the slice of life that everyday people are leading, but you've also said that there are some very important works that we now have because of these papyri finds.
That's right. The important works of literature that were read in the Greek and Roman period, but weren't selected for preservation.
And Sappho is one of these authors.
Sappho, popular comedies like Menander, romances and novels, like the Greek romances, both the ones that were transmitted, but also hundreds that didn't survive, and then a lot of technical literature, sex manuals, astrology, astrological handbooks, how to cast a horoscope, and the actual horoscopes that were cast. They're all in there. And we have literally millions of these things, more than we can actually work on. We've published
I was just going to
over
ask,
5,000 in the last century in published volumes entitled The Oxyrhynchus Papyri, and those are continuing. Everything we do continues to come out in those volumes. They're published by the Egypt Exploration Society in London, who actually own and oversee work on the papyri. But we've moved on now to a new website and web interface called Ancient Lives. It's ancientlives, one word.org.
Right, we'll have a link on the website.
And it allows users to come in and access the papyri, both the ones we've published and some new ones. And it allows anybody to make a real contribution, scientific contribution to the research project by performing a number of fairly simple tasks, transcribing individual Greek letters, measuring the papyri, and also transcribing modern scholars' inventory numbers of the papyri so that we can create a digital database of this massive data project. People can save their work, they can see their work, they can see what they're contributing to the project.
Citizen scholarship.
Citizen science is what the astrophysicists who modeled the system that we're using on millions of images of galaxies they had. It was a project called Zoo Galaxy, and we got linked up with them to do a version of it for the papyri because there's a similar amount of data involved. It's mainly based on images and classification of the images.
That's fascinating.
The digital aspect of it has revolutionized work on the field because it's made a body of material that was formerly the private province of a few scholars and museum curators, basically the property of everybody to work on, and it's completely opened up the way that we work on the papyri. We always worked on the papyri by one person transcribing them and another person transcribing them and comparing those two transcripts to see where they differed. There was usually a problem or an error, and then a third person would check them and make a decision which one was right and what was wrong. And the editorial process was always iterative. The process of sub-editing the papyri usually moved through 6 or 8 people reading each other's scripts and gradually improving them. And the idea that we had was that you could actually do this in a collaborative way with lots of people, and people didn't actually have to be a genius at reading Greek papyri to do it. All they had to do was be able to recognize letters of the Greek alphabet. If one person doesn't recognize one letter at that point in the quadrant, another person will. And the principle is if you have 100 people doing them, you can also statistically weight their performance based on other work they have done in order to, by cutting out the highs and the lows, achieve something like a 99.9 rate of accuracy of transcription.
Oh, that's remarkable.
So there's quite a lot of statistics and mathematics that have gone into that side of the program. At the same time, it's not automatic. It's not machine operated. It requires human assistance. It requires the human element of the individual human eye, and more than one pair of human eyes. So it's truly a collaborative effort in the real spirit of the humanities, but in this case assisted by a fair amount of science power as well, and that's why they call it citizen science.
It's a great way of getting people involved in both this subject specifically, but in academia more generally.
Yeah, well, it's partly in a response to request and demand for people to be involved. We have membership societies like the Egypt Exploration Society. Their members constantly coming to and asking, how can we help? Because they know this material is there. What can we do on the project. So it's partly a response to that. It's partly a response to test the methodology of what this is called crowdsourcing, see if it actually works. And then also just the desire to speed up the process of identifying how much more Sappho is there in the collection, how many lost Gospels, how many new emperors that we didn't know about, to speed up that process so you don't have to wait a century or two for it.
And that's the stuff that scholars want to get their teeth into afterwards.
Yes, I mean these texts provide the material of dissertations, of new books and articles, new evidence that open aspects for research that ancient historians hadn't previously known about. So it is essentially primary, first-hand evidence, and it's new.
New, which is remarkable because we're talking about 2,000 years ago.
Yeah, we're talking about things that are very old.
I wanted to ask about this actually, and kind of another aspect of the digital technology. Presumably a lot of this stuff is really difficult to read. So has the digital technology also revolutionised the way that we're now able to read this material?
Well, we started out thinking, well, we would try to do this in an automated way using optical character recognition, which it has advanced significantly. And if you have a medieval manuscript that's written all in one single hand, you can train an OCR program to read it to 75 or 80% rate of accuracy with a lot of training to the program and a good computer programmer working full time on it. But we're talking about millions of manuscripts, many of them small, but all written in very different hands. These are all different people, different ancient lives, writing a human product. And the first thing we discovered that was OCR was just not going to be able to read a 2nd century cursive secretary's hand. There are some of us that can't even read some of the handwriting. But some people are very clever about mastering handwritings. They don't have to be great linguists or philologists. You've probably had the experience of being able to read your grandfather's handwriting that nobody else could read, or the pharmacist who can read a doctor's handwriting that no one else can read.
That's certainly the case.
And this is what we find, that people come up who can read these texts. We have a modern Greek version. You can toggle to a modern Greek version of the site. It's running now in modern Greek, and my modern Greek students are vastly advantaged in reading this material because they grew up reading their grandparents and great-grandparents' handwriting, which is not that different for the 19th century, early 20th century hands, not that different from medieval hands, and the ancient hands are just a generation away from that. Although there are things in the collection that are still very difficult to read and nobody can read, this is pushing the envelope. And what the system allows you to do when you have to register and get a login, you can play around with it without registering, and you can save your work. But for us to get it, you have to register and make a password for yourself, and then you can submit your work to the system, and you're given a papyrus to work on. If you don't like that one to work on, if you say, ugh, that writing is ugly, I don't like ugly writing, you just click next and you get the next papyrus up. And you can do this until you get one that is small enough or big enough or hard enough or easy enough to suit you. And it doesn't matter whether you can recognize all the letters on the papyrus, because even if you just recognize half of them, or just a few, or even one or two, that is saved. It will go back in because we have an XY coordinate for each letter that you've clicked on. It will still submit that work and collate it with every other user who worked on that text. So every letter counts, basically.
Yeah, every letter counts. That's great. Just one last thing. You're finding all of this new material. What's the most exciting find for you?
We identified already, since the system has started to run, a new fragment of Theognis, the 5th century Megarian writer of elegy, Theognis. and a new fragment of Antimachus of Colophon, the 4th century epic poet that was nemesis of Alexandrian poets like Callimachus, who we only have in fragments, so that was pretty exciting. But also a wide array of important historical documents, including decrees of prefects that we didn't have before.
That's great. Dirk, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you and to find out about this new world, about the ancient world that's been opening up here and that everybody can now contribute to. Thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure.